If they have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get those slotted to our presenters with some of the rest of the questions in the crowd. We have 2 presentations to get to for an hour today, so we'll kind of be a little bit quick. If you have questions that are really long and rambly, feel free to get hold of the presenters afterwards. The first presentation we have is a collaborative approach to conservation, the Little Plover River Watershed Enhancement Project. This is Carmen Anderson, and she is the village planner for the village of Plover. So we will jump right into it. Carmen, it's all yours.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here to talk about the Little Plover River Watershed Enhancement Project. Oh, is that better? Can you hear me? Is everyone good? Good? Still quiet? Oh, okay. Is this better? Okay, good. Okay, so I'll just jump right into it since I feel like I might go over here. But to just start off, so if you're unfamiliar with the Little Plover River, it's about a 5-mile long river. So it's a small river, but it's definitely a very loved river in the area. It's a tributary of the Wisconsin River, and it's about 80 to 90% groundwater fed. So that's going to be really important. It's reliable on having good groundwater supply and recharge, but that's also going to mean that it's pretty vulnerable to the groundwater pumping, which we'll see that it's a pretty good example of what a lot of the areas in the Central Sands region has dealt with in the past. A lot of water bodies being impacted by the groundwater pumping, and the Little Plover River is definitely a good example of that, if not a good poster child for kind of what's gone wrong with it. So a little bit about the backstory. Around the 2005 to 2009 timeframe, the Little Plover River got a little bit of notoriety for having some dry ups in specific sections of the river. This kind of caused a little bit of discourse. There was some butting heads between some various groups, pointing fingers. You know, a lot of people were upset with agriculture and farming, think that's taking up all the water from the river. But there was also a little bit towards the municipality as well for their municipal water system and taking water from a well that's close to the river as well. In 2013, it was designated as an endangered river, which is not a good title to have. So we definitely knew that we couldn't kind of ignore the issue anymore. So that's when we started to take some action towards formulating some solutions. We created a master plan for our conservancy property, which we acquired a few properties in the watershed area to do restoration work and to hold in conservancy. In 2017, this was 2017, 2019 is when a lot of really kind of foundational work started. We had a survey done by the Wisconsin Geological and Natural History Survey. That was a groundwater model, a real state-of-the-art thing that they created for the Little Plover River that gave a really good foundation for what was going on in the watershed, as well as starting to give us some ideas of solutions that we could start to implement. And that is around the same time that the working group for the Watershed Enhancement Project kind of started to come together to take what we learned from these surveys and start to put it into action. And then, you know, it's definitely not a project that is finished in any way. We've done a lot of work out there already, but this is definitely something that's going to be continuing into the future as well. So we had some main things from these surveys that we learned. I mean, obviously, with the wells and the groundwater use, we knew this was a big issue. There's quite a few wells that surround the Little Plover River and the watershed. During the summer months, we could see well over 100 million gallons being pumped from the groundwater, mostly for irrigation, but also municipal uses and residential uses. So this was definitely having a big impact on the watershed. That survey did some simulations to where we can see the present day contributing area for the groundwater and how in its natural state historically, it's been a lot of a bigger contributing area. So we can see the impact that the wells have been having on the groundwater, and that's obviously going to impact the river and its flows as well, especially during those summer growing months. But this also made us realize kind of the broader issue that we can't just look at it from one perspective. So we can look at it just from the wells, but that's just one situation, that's just one marker of what's going to impact the watershed. We really need to be looking at it from a whole watershed perspective, seeing how the development and the disconstruction drainage tiles has really historically impacted not just with the river, but the entire watershed in general. And so we have a lot of wetland loss and just a pretty disjointed watershed system in general. And so if we want to help the river, we have to look at other approaches besides just handling the groundwater usage. And so with the Watershed Enhancement Project group, we came together and we have three main goals. So increasing the flows and the aquatic health of the river, implementing management projects that improve the health of the watershed in general, and improving and expanding the fish and wildlife habitat and public recreation access. And this was, the bread and butter of this whole project was the community aspect. It was a community-led initiative. It brought together a lot of different groups that have various interests, but they all kind of came together under the same goal of wanting to find solutions for the watershed because we're all users of it, and so we all rely on it. So that was a really big selling point for a lot of people to come together and work on this. So we have a pretty big, a wide array of people. We have, industry, agriculture groups, farmers, landowners, conservationists and hydrologists, community volunteers and students, and local and even state officials have come out to help on this project. So we've had a lot of really great buy-in from the community, as well as being able to get all those various perspectives to really be able to make a good impact. This was over $2 million in investment, so it was definitely a really big undertaking. Obviously, a lot of that came from grants and awards, but we had a good in-kind match from our partners as well. We like to think this is a really easy thing to get behind for a lot of these funding sources, because it really shows that the community is leading the charge for this, and there's the broader picture. We're trying to make something that's sustainable for generations to come, and so it's a pretty good thing to want to get behind. So we're lucky to have a lot of these funding partners that help us be able to accomplish a lot of these goals. And so where a lot of this was taking place was out on our conservancy lands. So the village owns two properties. We have the Dan Mahoney Conservancy site and then the Soik property. And then it's also bounded by the Little Plover River State Fishery Area as well. The Daniel R. Mahoney Conservancy property is 140 acres. We did a lot of habitat restoration out there, as well as some channel improvements. And that's also where we're going to have some planned public access and recreation. And then the Soik property is 59 acres of retired farmland at the headwaters of the river. And that was under the Wisconsin Wetland Conservation Trust. And that works on restoring the hydrology and wetland communities. So revegetation, as well as we filled a lot of drainage ditches out in that area as well, which has made a pretty good difference. So to look at what was actually done out there, we did quite a few things, and it's within not a very long period of time, which goes to show how powerful our collaborative approach has been in getting a lot of voluntary actions for this. We even had industry, Del Monte, a big business in the village. They do a lot of on-site water recycling. We have voluntary efforts on behalf of the farmers and the landowners. They're choosing to voluntarily help monitor their water use. They're practicing rotational grazing and other sustainable practices, updating their equipment. We even had farmers taking the lead to fill in ditches on their own properties. So we had a lot of good farmer support and willingness to voluntarily take action in this project. We weren't forcing them into doing anything. This was something that we opened up the conversation to all these different groups, and they were willing to come and help out and support us and give us their knowledge of the land and their practices. And that was pretty invaluable for the whole project as a whole. The village as well has done a lot to help with our water efficiency, updating our leak detection technology. We rotate the pumping between our 3 wells in the village. So, during summer months, we're not going to pump in the well that's closer to the river. We're going to take it to the 2 that are farther away to help with impacts on the Little Pole River and the watershed. We filled well over 5,000 feet of ditches, and there's definitely more to come on that frontage. Retired a lot of farmland. We decommissioned a well, as well as reduced pumping in nearby wells. And so we've seen a lot of good improved groundwater infiltration. We're saving groundwater. We're saving money with water efficiency. We're returning flows to the headwaters of the river and increasing those summer low flows, which are going to be helpful in hopefully not having any more dry ups in the river, especially during those summer growing months. We did a lot of clearing, channel narrowing, stream bank improvements. We established wetlands, over hundreds of acres of habitat restoration. So definitely a big improvement out there. We were able to narrow the channel from 35 feet in some areas to 6 feet, which is its historic width, and deepen the channel from 1 feet to 3 feet. We definitely seen improved trout numbers out there as well. It is a class 1 trout stream, so it's important to have that habitat where they can thrive. So we have seen improved trout numbers and just being able to attract wildlife to the area in general. And those floodplain connections are really important. So this work has definitely been able to reconnect the floodplain and make it a functioning watershed area. We also have kind of a living laboratory out there for University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Their students kind of use it as an outdoor classroom. They have a whole management plan for what they do out there. So they've done a lot of good work, and we're lucky to have their involvement as well. But going back to the kind of voluntary and community-led approach, we've had over 200 hours of volunteer work put out there, a lot of it driven by just community members that have wanted to support this project. They use it as a recreational benefit. So this was something that, is going to benefit them as well. They see the purpose in it. And it also helps them become more connected to the place. And so when people are exposed to these issues, they want to come out and help create solutions, and they become more attached to the area, and they plant their own roots, and they want to help support it for the future. So it's good to have community members out there leading the charge, because it allows generations to also want to follow in their footsteps, and it creates a constant stream of support for keeping these things going. So it was good to have the community out there, having farmers doing those voluntary actions. We even had state officials out there helping us with some of these projects. So there was a lot of different people that came together to actually get their hands dirty and do some of this work with us. And then I just have a few pictures of kind of the process of some of the work. So we did some prescribed burns out on the soil property, obviously filled in a lot of ditches, berm creation, and then some photos of what the landscapes kind of look out there now more recently. So we have a lot of nice acres of prairie with all that habitat restoration. You can see in this one, this was kind of when the woods were cleared, but you can see the difference between the stream channel widths. We have the ditch filling, and obviously attracting wildlife back to the area. So it's been nice to see kind of how the place has not just been beautified, but it's actually providing for our environment, and therefore providing for us as well. And then just to kind of give an example of where we want to take it in the future. This is a concept plan that we have for our conservancy properties. So we want to have that public recreational aspect to really be able to get the public out there and be able to appreciate it and use it, because this conservancy property is open to the public, but it's just not very accessible to be able to get out there. There's no good place for someone to come in and park. It's just kind of a little bit messy out there. So we definitely want to get some access points in there, some nice places to maybe have a picnic, and then trails that kind of interweave throughout the whole property. Be good for wildlife viewing, birding, whatever you want to do out there. We want to keep it minimal to kind of lessen the disturbance. We also just want to have the emphasis be on the natural area. So it doesn't need much. It just needs to be a place where people can get out there and actually walk and see all the improvements that have been done and be able to enjoy the natural area. And so that is really a pretty brief overview. You really could talk about this for a long time. There's a lot that's been done out there. It could probably take hours to get through all of it. But just a little brief history of where we've been from having all of that discourse over the water drying up and what are we going to do about it, to seeing the actual actions that we've been able to take to improve the river and the watershed, and really keying in on the collaborative effort. There's a lot of different approaches that we could have taken, but we chose this because we think it was a good way to get people involved without having to feel like they're being pushed into anything, opening up those conversations, seeing what the goals are of the different various groups and finding those commonalities. And that was really able to get us a lot of voluntary participation, which was very great, especially being able to get the farmers and the landowners in that area to have their knowledge. I mean, some of them have been farming here for over 100 years, so they know the land really well. We were able to really use their knowledge in finding ways to make the biggest impact on the land. So that's pretty much all I have for that. If you want to go on our village webpage, we have a whole page dedicated to this project. There's a really great 7-part video series by the Wisconsin Wetland Association about this project. They're great videos. You can hear a lot from the people that were integral to this project. And I encourage you to get out and walk the property. I mean, it is open to the public, but also to just learn more, because this was definitely a very good project that got a lot of good recognition for, I think, a reason. So yeah, that's pretty much all that I have there.
Comments here before we can transition in the next, or before we need to transition in the next presentation. If anybody has any few questions for Carmen, we'll take them. I will ask you to speak it in the mic so our virtual folks can hear us. And then Erin, if we have any questions online, let me know and we will ask them as well.
This does look like an amazing project, and I can see all the end results and all the groups that are involved, but you kind of skipped over the how any of that happened.
Okay, so like the process of getting it to where we're implementing. Yeah.
Whose fault is it to have all this collaboration, but you, I can't, how did you get to that point?
Yeah, so I mean, the first part was kind of seeing the issue, right? So we had those surveys done. We were able to see the issues. And then it kind of just started by kind of opening up those conversations. So we had to go out to landowners. We had to go out to farmers. We had to bring the issues to them and then see how they could participate and help us. So coming up with a lot of solutions or ideas by all these groups that, you know, also were speaking out about the issue. So kind of sitting down, having those conversations, and then taking it from there to actually starting to implement them. So going for grants and getting those fundings secured. And then we can actually get out there and have those work days where we start implementing the solutions that we got now that we have the funds and we have the support and the backing. And then we can actually get out there and do the work.
Someone obviously had to apply for grants and be in charge and so on.
Yeah, and the village took a lot of the lead on it. We kind of were the ones that initiated the whole, you know, needing to do something. So, so I would say the village took the lead, but definitely every member in this group had a good role to play in it. So the village took a lot of, you know, administrative lead, but the technical lead was kind of on conservationist groups and hydrologists and, knowledge of the land and figuring out what to, wells to decommission and things like that were on the farmers and the landowners. But the village kind of provide a nice, foundation for people to come to us with these issues, and then we can take it out.
And can I just, I'm sorry, I'm hogging them, but I'm sure everyone has these same questions. So the surveys that were done, what format or how did that, were these surveys that went to people and stakeholders, or were these like physical land surveys? I didn't quite get that.
Physical land surveys. So
Okay.
they were done by professional organizations that did out there and did the science and then put together a report for us with a lot of different data modeling and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, do we have any questions from our virtual audience?
Awesome job. Thank you. Thank you.
I will also echo awesome job. Anybody else? We got a few more minutes here. Ooh, I gotta figure out how to get over here.
Thank you very much. Thanks. So I see that you're the town planner. So this isn't your main job, right? Like, I'm just curious, like how much
Yeah.
time you get to spend on this, because I'm sure you have other responsibilities.
Yeah, and actually, I've only been working with the village for about a year. So I wasn't even here when this started. Obviously, it was all the way back to 2005, really. But so I've gotten the privilege and the opportunity to learn from a lot of different people that have been a part of it. So that's where I've kind of gained a lot of my knowledge. But going forward, I obviously will be working with getting the recreation out there as well. So it's kind of picking it up where it left off. But yeah, it's definitely not my main job. I do a lot of different things in the village, but I'm definitely very happy to be a part of being able to work on this project in whatever way that I can. But yeah, not my main thing. I haven't even been doing it for that long, but definitely a good thing to be a part of.
Any other questions? Oh, 1 second, Eric. You were second.
Sorry, Eric. Very interesting and well explained. So this project was not producer-led. This was led by
Yeah, I mean,
how you explained it.
we had producers be a part of the, collaborative process.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, it was initiated by the village. It was kind of,
Okay.
I guess, spearheaded by them, but they
Okay.
were definitely a part of, giving us information and being a part. So like they weren't polarized from the situation because
Okay.
they're definitely a part of the solution.
Mhm.
They're a water user. So
Mhm.
they were involved, but, they weren't the main person kind of leading the charge for most of it.
Thank you.
My question is also about kind of how things shifted or what made things change. And I wonder if you can go back to the slide that had sort of the detailed budget information that showed sort of on one side that one right there. So if I look at this, I'm like, okay, $2.6 million and 1.4 from the DNR. What was the $1.4 million for? Like, what did that actually go to?
So from the Wisconsin DNR, the Wetland Conservation. So that's pretty much all centered towards our soy property. That was part of the Wisconsin Wetlands Conservation Trust. So the soy property. No, I don't believe it was to buy, or was it? I mean, Josh has helped us with this, and I was not here for this, so I might not know the answer.
Just real quick, yeah, that I coordinate the Wisconsin Wetland Conservation Trust from the DNR, and yeah, it was for land acquisition as well as restoration, and then it's a wetland mitigation project. So we also had like 5 years of maintenance and monitoring, so hence the high budget there.
So convenient to have you in the room with us. And who happens to be our next presenter. So we will use that as a transition point. Again, after this next talk, I think we have about a 15-minute transition period. So if you have any lingering questions, feel free to come back and get a hold of her, and we will see what we can do to answer questions. All right, excellent. Thank you again. Yeah, well, I want to see if I can get you mic'd up and get this thing sorted out because it'd be really convenient for me to have that handy mic. See if you can clip it kind of close to your chest by the center, maybe.
Okay, how's that? Oh, no, I got thumbs up. Any better? Okay, it does sound the same for me up here. Either way. All right, I'll do my best here.
Yeah, we want to make sure our virtual folks can hear with that microphone too. All right, so again, this is Josh Brown, as he's the in-lieu fee wetland mitigation coordinator with this at the Wisconsin DNR, like he just mentioned, and would be an expert to answer the last question. He oversees the program administration and implementation of 14 mitigation projects across the state. He's been with the DNR for 12 years. All right, take it away, Josh.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning. And just as was said, my name is Josh Brown. I'm the program coordinator for a DNR program called the Wisconsin Wetland Conservation Trust. Quite a mouthful there, I know. It's a type of wetland mitigation program, which we'll talk a little bit about. And today we're going to be talking about the Davis Wetland Restoration Project, helping the Mukwonago River watershed. And today, just real quick, we'll go over the partners that were involved in the project, give a little site overview, a little bit of mitigation overview, just so you know what it is, a little bit about the Mukwonago River and its watershed, and then we'll get into details of this wetland restoration project. So first off, just the partners. First off, my program, the Wisconsin Wetland Conservation Trust. It's an in-lieu fee wetland mitigation program sponsored by the DNR. We sell wetland credits to developers to offset permitted wetland fill. And we now have 15 mitigation projects totaling about 900 acres across the state. And our partner in this project, similar to Carmen and the Village of Plover, but for this one, it was the Waukesha County Land Conservancy. It's a nonprofit land trust dedicated to preserving, restoring, and stewarding valuable lands to protect Waukesha County's watersheds, plant communities, wildlife habitat, and open spaces. So those were the two main partners in the project. And my role was to oversee and fund most of the project, and Waukesha County actually implemented the project on the ground. And then just a quick overview of this Mukwonago Davis site shown here in red. It's 52 acres in size. It's owned by Waukesha County Land Conservancy. It's adjacent to the west to the Kettle Moraine State Forest, and to the north, the Mukwonago River. It's located in southern Waukesha County, west of the village of Mukwonago. And the restoration and management of the project was funded through wetland mitigation, as I mentioned. And just because I think it's a unique kind of world, wetland mitigation, I think it's worth talking about just very briefly. And so here, state law says that the unavoidable permitted wetland impacts require mitigation. So maybe you've heard the term mitigation, but also maybe you've heard of carbon trading. And so it's more or less like carbon trading for wetlands. It's where a permittee or a developer, typically we call them a permittee in state government jargon, they either pay into a wetland mitigation bank, which is more or less, you can look at that as like a non-DNR mitigation, or to my WWCT program, which is more or less DNR administered mitigation. And so what these developers or permittees do, they pay money in to buy credits, and a credit is basically an acre of wetland fill or wetland restoration. And then once they buy those credits, they're able to receive their wetland permit and complete their development project. And in Wisconsin, there are two options here. As I said, this mitigation bank, that's the first priority. And then my program, WWCT, we fill in the gaps across the state where there aren't any of these mitigation banks, as no one could force, a private citizen or entity of any sort to do these mitigations. My program is just there to sell these credits where there aren't any of these private mitigation bank credits. And now we're just gonna zoom in real quickly on my program a little more and how it works. And so first off, I should mention, I apologize, here we are in Southeast Wisconsin. This is the project's located in southern Waukesha County in what we call our Upper Illinois watershed. It's actually the Upper Fox River, but we also have the other Fox River that goes into Green Bay, so we call it Upper Illinois. And so what we do, so permittees or developers from this watershed, shown here in orange, they pay into my ILF program. I should say ILF and WWCT, they're synonymous. They're the same things for the purpose of this talk. They pay into our program, and when they pay in, they receive credits. And once they have their credit, then they're able to get their wetland permit and complete their development project. And then what I do is I then combine fees from several credit sales, and with a partner, we find a drained farm field, typically has drain tile or drainage ditches in it. And in this case, this is the Mukwonago Davis site, something very similar to that. And then we fund the wetland restoration. And this wetland restoration down here offsets this permitted fill back here. Just a brief overview of how the mitigation process works. And now just want to give some context on the watershed and the Mukwonago River itself, because it is a very valuable and important system in southeast Wisconsin. First off, here you're just seeing wetlands and other, I think, buffer habitat or setbacks from wetlands here. So you see it's a very wetland-rich area. This area in here is important to note is a former golf course, the Rainbow Springs Golf Course, and it is also completely drained former wetland as well. And you can see here in this in our Davis site, there's no mapped wetlands currently, and that is just because that was pre-wetland restoration. So now, if this map was redone, most of this area in the yellow would be now green. A little more information on the watershed and the wetlands there. First, you're seeing the Huck 10 Mukwonago River watershed, so a larger watershed. And then here we're zoomed in on this, I guess, darkest purple color. This is the Huck 12 watershed. And pretty much what you're seeing here is the type of ecosystem services currently available as mapped by a really great tool I want to mention called Wetlands by Design. That was completed by the Nature Conservancy and the DNR and other partners. And what it does, it more or less evaluates the ecosystem services provided by wetlands, current wetlands, which are in green, but also these areas or polygons in red are the potential services of a potential wetland restoration, which includes our Davis site. And then to zoom in here a little more, pretty much the takeaway here is that the darker the red here, that means that a wetland restoration could provide more ecosystem services, all of these shown here. And the dark green is just showing that the existing wetlands are already providing a high number of ecosystem services. And you can see these here, but in general, it's just flood abatement, water quality, and fish and wildlife habitat are typically these services in short or generalized. So just, a lot of good opportunity and a lot of good existing, benefits going on for the watershed in this area. And then a little bit about the Mukwonago River and its watershed. It's described as one of the cleanest and most diverse rivers in southeast Wisconsin. There's 53 species of fish, including 2 state listed, 16 species of mussels, and it contains the last self-sustaining populations of each of fish and mussel species in the state of Wisconsin. And those are listed species, and I'm not supposed to tell you, but it's pretty readily available online if you want to know those specific mussel and fish species are. And in the watershed, there's 3,000 acres of Nature Conservancy preserves, and there's also, I don't know the exact number, definitely hundreds, if not 1,000 acres owned by the DNR, including the Kettle Moraine State Forest, Southern Unit, and Beulah Bog State Natural Area. And so just a real hotbed for diversity and ecology, especially in the highly developed southeast part of the state. And just in general, like why this wetland restoration project at the Davis property and wetlands in general benefits watersheds. And in short, they provide, I've already rattled these off, 4 main services. There's flood attenuation, when you restore wetlands, you usually restore the hydrology. You put water back on the site where it's previously been drained, so that instead of that flood waters in flowing off the site quickly and going downstream, it's now being soaked up like a sponge by that wetland. So it reduces flooding. It also improves water quality. Wetlands act again as like a sponge or a filter, filtering out some of those nutrients and contaminants. Also provides wildlife habitat from not only just waterfowl or water birds, but herps, reptiles, amphibians, and mammals. And then also just a human use provides recreation for us as people, another important service to recognize. So now we're going to get into some of the details of this project. And so the Waukesha County Land Conservancy, they applied in order to receive funds, much like the Village of Plover did with their Soik property. They applied and was selected to receive funding back in 2017. And the Davis site met all important selection criteria, including it was cropped, it was drained, hydric soils, meaning it had drainage ditches in it, which I'll describe more in a minute. Had wetland soils. The hydrology could be restored by filling these ditches. Expanded on existing conservation, as we already talked about. And we had willing and able partners in the Land Conservancy. And then so we awarded a contract to WCLC to fund plan design, seeding, and call construction, which is pretty much wetland restoration, filling these ditches, creating scrapes. 8 years of maintenance and monitoring, maintenance primarily being invasive species control. And then we also fund long-term management through an endowment we've created with the Natural Resources Foundation. And so here we have just a map of the site plan. So as I mentioned, the primary work was ditch plugs and scrapes. And so these colors over here are just different wetland habitat types. Mostly this blue is sedge meadow, green is wet prairie, and then this tan is more of a mesic prairie, and then some shrub wetland up here in the north. And I want you to pay attention especially to these orange lines here. These are ditch plugs, and I'll show a picture here next. But these plugs are placed in the drainage ditches to back up water and have the water spread out over the site instead of flowing in ditches into the river. And this is warm, nutrient-heavy, sediment-loaded water. So definitely not, doing the river any sort of help here. So it's good to keep this water on site through the wetland restoration process. So we filled ditches down here, which was flowing north. And it's kind of interesting, I guess there is this elevation divide here where this one ditch in the southeast actually flows away from the river. Eventually it circles back around, but here in the zoomed in, I guess, scale, it flows away from the river. So yeah, we are talking about it's mostly sedge meadow, wet prairie habitat, and then just a very basic principle of wetland restoration. You can't flood your neighbors, at least without permission. So we did make one existing wetland area a little wetter down here, but we did have permission to do that. And now just getting to I think the fun stuff, the good stuff, some photos here. This site, pre-restoration, was just pretty typical southern Wisconsin farm field. And it had these series of drainage ditches here. This one's already been cleared of trees on the side, just so you can see it. But these are pretty big ditches. And water's going to travel the path of least resistance. So it's more or less sucked up into these ditches instead of being, spread out at a higher, groundwater elevation into site. And then it is just, pushed out into the Mukwonago River. And so what we did, here's another photo of the ditch, but we filled these ditches. We created wetland scrapes, and there's also, dirt or spoils present next to the ditches. And we pushed all that dirt in to create plugs. And this here used to be a ditch, but now it's been filled in. And again, that's to spread that water out and keep it on site. Just an aerial before and after. Some of these are pretty subtle. But you can see over here, we created a wetland scrape. This is mainly just to get material to fill ditches. I especially want to see down here, there used to be, here's a ditch plug right there. And there's another one down here, and then a couple here in the middle. And probably most importantly, you just see these dark areas of, this is wet soil and actually standing water. You're seeing that, this southern part of the site had the most ditches and was lowest, so hence is showing some of these wetland signatures a little more. And then post-restoration, in general, the site's been very successful. We've recorded over 70 native plant species, 22.5 acres of, I'd say, added wetlands. By added, I mean put back. Wetlands that were there pre-European settlement, but through ditching were removed, and we restored those wetlands to the site. We also did 14.5 acres of upland prairie restoration. I think characteristic of any good wetland is a good, surrounding upland area to buffer the wetland. And then we also enhanced 15 acres of existing wetland. That was primarily through invasive species control. And then again, as Carmen mentioned, we've had a great deal of community involvement through field trips, neighbors, just a lot of local stakeholders, just getting out to the site and seeing all the good work that has happened. And then in more detail, of course, again, as Carmen just mentioned, partnerships do make it possible and are essential. For this mitigation project, it was actually not acquired with my mitigation program's dollars, but it was already owned by the WCLC Land Conservancy. And then there were several partners involved in the restoration. And there was this advocacy, outreach, education component as well. So that's pretty much it. And then I'm going to give a couple shameless plugs here to my program, but it'll be very quickly. Just again, like our program, we are, I feel like, a good tool for conservation in the state. We can partner with anyone, more or less, like conservation groups like Waukesha County, municipalities like the Village of Plover, or with private landowners. With private landowners, if you're familiar with the NRCS program, like WRP, Wetland Reserve Program, it's very similar in the way it functions. And the WCT program can fund most everything, including land and easement acquisition, all the construction, restoration, and seeding, at least 5 years of maintenance and monitoring, and then perpetual annual long-term management. And just in general, I already mentioned too, but sites must be primarily drained cropland, and then public access is not required. In the past, public access was required for this program, but we had a law change a couple years ago. And then just in closing here, I think it's important and worth mentioning, we do have a fair amount of funding available for wetland restoration across the state. And you can just see some of the amounts here per watershed, the most being this upper Illinois where we were talking, but also in what we call our Southwest Lake Michigan watershed or service area, Northwest Lake Michigan, and over here in the western part of the state in the upper Miss Black Root. And with that, I should mention Allison from Waukesha County Land Conservancy could not be here today, but she's been our main partner and contact there. But please check out both her organization and my program. And with that, I think I'm done. Happy to answer any questions.
So much. All right, Peter, see first.
Thank you. That's really impressive. You mentioned over 70 species of plants now out in those wetlands. Did you find anything that you hadn't planted? Like, did any new species come in?
Here. Good question. I mean, there's definitely some volunteer stuff as far as some adjacent cottonwood stuff blowing in. I think there's a species of juncus on site, a rush that was not planted. I've not been intimately involved with the plant survey, so I can't speak to that. But most of it is definitely from the seed mix. But it's probably likely that more will show up over time, of course, too.
Aaron, do we have anything from our virtual audience? All right, you just let me know.
So were there any water quality monitoring protocols to kind of validate the water quality improvements of the wetland?
Yep, good question. And for wetland mitigation, I'd say probably for worse, there are no water quality metrics that have to be met. We do have to meet groundwater depth standards, and that's pretty much showing that, by filling the ditches, or often use break drain tile, if anyone's familiar with drain tile, groundwater levels are raised, and there does have to be proof showing that there's groundwater present. It's within the top foot of the soil surface, or within the soil surface for I think it's a month at a time, but no water quality. That can be difficult, to actually prove that this restoration, this one place, this one specific spot, water quality was improved from the restoration. Good question.
Can you talk more about how the fees and credits are determined? Is it like a flat fee per acre of wetland, or is it like based on land value, or is there like some kind of floristic quality that goes into it, or?
Yep, great question. And so we adjust our credit. Again, a credit is more or less an acre of wetland fill and an acre of wetland restoration. We more or less have this credit card of credits that we've been authorized to sell. And so then we're in the red, and then we do these mitigation projects like this one or Carmen's at Soik to pay off that credit debt, more or less. And credit fee is based on the cost of restoration. And so we just have, estimating project costs, come up with numbers for we call like pre-construction, construction, and then maintenance and monitoring. And then we also include a land value, because for not this one, but most of our projects, we do pay for land or pay for an easement. Land value is determined through annual USDA ag land sales by county. We aggregate counties approximated based on those service areas or watersheds. And that's more or less it. And then we have like an inflation rate we add on for every year. So there's our fees that are set, and that's per credit. And then mitigation's a crazy complicated world, so I apologize. But there's a ratio that's added on. So like if a developer fills 1 acre, they have to buy 1.45 credits. And why 1.45 is, it's more than one, is what's important there, I think.
I'll ask a question. It seems like in some of your watersheds, you have more credit than you have projects. And that in some other watersheds, those are less. Can you talk a little bit? Yeah, there you go. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the different credit markets, I guess? And, what is that cost per acre? If I'm a developer in the upper Illinois watershed and I want to fill in an acre of wetland, how much money do I have to pay you through the program?
Yep. Well, I think it's very important to note that just because you're willing to do wetland mitigation doesn't mean that you're allowed to do wetland mitigation. There's an alternatives analysis, again, jargon, that the developer has to go through and pretty much prove that, there's nowhere else they can put this project to, not fill wetlands. So if they meet those standards, then if it's a big enough impact, they do have to complete mitigation. And first off, as far as location, it's more or less just urban areas. There's a lot more mitigation going on in urban areas, which I think makes sense. Also, it's important to note, because it's urban and land values are extra high, there aren't many of those private mitigation banks. That was the option 1 in an earlier slide, if you recall. There aren't many of those, so therefore my program is selling more credits. Specifically Upper Illinois, I don't know, does anyone want to guess where the big development's coming from there? I don't know if you're familiar, but it's through the Foxconn project, or now it's a Microsoft, I think, data center. That's the big driver. Then it is also just utilities. There's been some big hospital expansions, residential, commercial development as well. And as far as cost per credit, it's roughly, it depends. I kind of rattled off the different criteria going in there, but since land values are higher in Southeast Wisconsin, they're most, our credits there are about, I think it's $120,000 a credit. This is, a lot of, I consider expensive. But then, more in the northwest part of the state, it's more around, 90 to 100,000. And that's primarily based on land value, land costs.
Aaron, do we have anything? All right. Any other? Oh.
I think you touched on this, but I already forgot. So can you do a wetland mitigation project on conservation easement land, or does it have to be fee simple?
Well, a site can have conservation easement already on it. It gets complicated. We can't get any credits from federal money That's a requirement. We can't double dip, if that makes sense. And so there can be, but then we just get fewer credits. And so I don't know, let's say there's a site with conservation easement already on it. There's $100,000 for that land value. It's $1 million project. We'd subtract our credits by 10%, if that generally makes sense. So we can have conservation easements. It gets pretty complicated there, so we try not to. But so, I mean, we do fee simple acquisition for partners like the Village of Plover. This Waukesha County didn't, or we work with private landowners, farmers, and we could just pay them for the value of their easement directly. It kind of just depends on every project's unique in that regard.
Are you like reaching out to farmers in different groups? I mean, obviously you're doing presentations and asking people to come to you. Do you also got try to like target like, hey, this is like a great area to go and like be more proactive that way?
For sure. We have some federal required timelines to meet, which is generally about 3 years. And so we have our website, and we have like a quarterly RFP. We're always updating, but yeah, tons of outreach to the counties, conservation groups, municipalities. And then even in, when you really need to find a site, we'll do specific, landowner outreach. Because it's very, I think in all these, maybe you've seen some of these, but there's all these tools out there to find wetland restoration projects, but it all comes down to landowners and willing sellers for let's say a fair value. And so when we really need to, then we'll do, very targeted outreach through generally just letters. But also we have like, partners, wetland or environmental consultants, they'll do their own outreach as well, looking for sites.
And with that, we'll give our two presenters another round of applause. All right, we are out a little early. It is 8:53 right now. We're coming back at 9. Is that correct? Or oh no, 9:15. Okay, so until 9:15, we have a short break. Go get some coffee, go mingle, go to the restroom. We'll be back in these rooms at 9:15 for our next series of concurrent sessions. If you want to learn more about Lake, River, and Watershed science, come back to this room. I'll be here. Presenters straight up not show up yesterday. We had, thankfully, our moderator had some kind of presentation set up on the slide, so I'm really happy. Yeah, really appreciate both of you coming and sharing your stories.
I've heard your name, but I can't figure it out. No, I don't think he's done any rezoning. Trying to when we even need well, so we're in a shoreline zone, we're doing wetlands, oh, sure. Yeah. I know I know we've done like ditch fill or earthwork within shorelines who have gotten over it, but not that often. I think you're way out of this. If you want to reach out to me, okay. I don't want to withhold information on this stuff has changed. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to scratch something down real quick. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so no, I'll email you. Sure. Sure. That's great. Yes, please.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. I think like it's 6 years ago. Right? So I'm interested, but it's just still like. So takes a lot of time, you know, raises and all that. Some of the land trust projects, it's nature center. No, we're always reaching out, especially the southeast Wisconsin. And it's just, we have but farmland, which is hard, big and yeah. I think now at least we have done successful projects. Yeah, I mean. That's kind of a project for like huge undertaking. Lucky for me, she was willing to jump in, and we kind of